All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep into the world of polytheism.
Oh, sounds exciting.
It is. We're taking a deep dive into John Michael Greer's book, A World Full of Gods.
Ah, yes, a classic.
We've got excerpts straight from the book, and then, well, these look like someone's personal notes trying to, I don't know, summarize the key themes, maybe.
That's great. We love multiple perspectives here.
Exactly. And I have a feeling that this is going to be one of those deep dives that makes you, see the world a bit differently afterward.
I think you're absolutely right. Polytheism is one of those topics that people just get wrong so often.
Yeah.
And Greer, he really digs into all those little nuances in a way that I think is really fascinating and relevant to how we live today.
For sure. So let's just start with the basics. What is polytheism? We've all heard the simple definition, right? It's believing in many gods.
Right.
But Greer, he kind of goes beyond that, doesn't he?
He does. He really argues that it's not just about the number of gods.
It's a whole different way of experiencing the divine, for example, Greer talks about how polytheism sees the divine kind of reflected in nature, in human emotions, even in the things we create.
Yeah.
So it's the sacred it's just woven into the fabric of existence itself.
So rather than one all-powerful God out there somewhere, in polytheism, it's kind of like the divine is all around us, right?
Exactly, yeah. And that leads to some really interesting ideas about how we interact with the divine, in monotheism, you've typically got one set of rules, one dogma.
Right.
But in polytheism, well, imagine having a different God for each aspect of your life.
Okay, I'm trying to picture this. So it's almost like having a specialist for every need.
Right.
So need wisdom,
Yes.
go to Athena,
Yes.
love, Aphrodite's your girl,
Exactly.
feeling vengeful, maybe steer clear of Hera. Right. And it's not even just about praying to different gods for different things. It's about acknowledging the complexity of existence.
Yeah.
You're not bound by one rigid set of rules because the divine itself is multifaceted.
That's so fascinating. And it really makes you think about how polytheism, might have actually worked in practice back in the day. I mean, when we think about ancient cultures like the Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, their gods were a huge part of everyday life, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Greer points out how in these polytheistic societies, you'd see gods and goddesses depicted everywhere,
Right.
in statues, temples, on pottery, even in the layout of their cities.
It's true, yeah. So it wasn't just a Sunday thing. It was the divine was integrated into every aspect of their culture.
To the extent.
They'd have festivals for certain gods, make offerings, build temples to honor them. They even saw their gods playing out in the natural world.
Yeah.
The sun, the moon, the storms.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And this constant interaction with the divine, it created a sense of enchantment, this feeling that the world was alive with magic and meaning.
And that's a feeling that, that seems to be kind of missing in our modern super scientific world,
That's something Greer really emphasizes, actually. He argues that polytheism can help us re-enchant the world, to see it with that sense of wonder and awe again.
Totally.
For example, he talks about how the ancient Celts, they saw spirits in the trees and rivers.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine walking through a forest and feeling you're surrounded by living conscious beings.
It completely changes your whole perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Instead of just seeing a bunch of trees, you'd see a sacred grove, a place filled with spirits and stories.
Exactly, yeah. And that sense of connection to something larger than ourselves, I think, is something that a lot of people are really yearning for today.
Okay. So we've seen how polytheism was kind of woven into the lives of these ancient cultures.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, it started to decline, right?
Right.
Monotheistic religions like Christianity and Islam, they began to spread. And, well, we all know how that went.
Yeah, that's right. And Greer doesn't shy away from the historical realities of religious conflict and suppression.
Right.
But what's interesting is that even in polytheism, declined, it didn't completely disappear.
Right.
Bits and pieces of it, they kind of survived, sometimes hidden in plain sight.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, think about some of the traditions we still have today, celebrating the harvest, making wishes on a shooting star, knocking on wood for good luck.
Right.
These practices, while often secularized.
Yeah, yeah.
They have their roots in older, like, polytheistic beliefs and rituals.
So it's almost like these echoes of polytheism have persisted even in cultures dominated by, monotheism. It makes you wonder if there's something about that worldview, that continues to like resonate with us on a deeper level.
Absolutely. And that brings us to, I think, a really crucial question, which is polytheism just a relic of the past? Or can it actually be relevant to our lives today?
I mean, are we really going to start like worshiping Zeus on our lunch break?
Maybe not Zeus specifically, but
Right.
Greer makes a pretty compelling case for the relevance of polytheism in the modern world, and that's something we'll be exploring next.
Welcome back to our deep dive into polytheism.
Yes, welcome back.
Last time we kind of explored like what polytheism even is,
Right.
and how it was like woven into the fabric of these ancient cultures,
Mm-hmm.
And we even kind of hinted at its potential relevance in the modern world.
Exactly.
And it's that idea of modern relevance, I think, that we're going to dig into now.
I agree, yeah.
Because I think a lot of people, when they hear polytheism, they just think of like ancient myths and togas,
Yeah.
not something that's like relevant to their lives in 2024.
Totally, yeah. And Greer challenges that assumption.
Yeah.
He argues that polytheism isn't just some, like, dusty old belief system.
Yeah.
It actually has a lot to offer us in the 21st century.
Okay, so I'm intrigued, but before we get into like how polytheism is relevant today, maybe let's talk about what it actually looks like in practice.
Sure.
I mean, how did people do polytheism, right?
Yeah.
Was it all like big temples and animal sacrifices?
Well, I mean, there were certainly temples and sacrifices in some cultures,
Yeah.
but polytheistic practice was like incredibly diverse.
Mm-hmm.
It varied, depending on the culture, the specific gods being honored, even like the individual practitioner.
So there wasn't like one right way to do polytheism.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And that's something that's really important to understand. Polytheism wasn't about following like a rigid dogma or a set of rules handed down from on high. It was about cultivating like relationships with the gods.
Okay, hold on. Relationships, like with Zeus and Hera and all of them.
Exactly, yeah. And just like any relationship, it took time, effort, and a willingness to listen and respond.
So how did people like actually build those relationships? I mean, did they just like send a friend request to Aphrodite on Mount Olympus?
That's where those practices we mentioned earlier, they come in, right? Meditation, offerings, rituals. These were all like ways to connect to the gods, to communicate with them, and to show your respect and gratitude.
So it's not about like passively believing in a bunch of gods. It's about like actively engaging with them, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And that active engagement could take like many forms, For example, Greer, he talks about how the ancient Greeks, they would hold like festivals to honor their gods,
Right.
There'd be music, dancing, athletic competitions. It was a real celebration.
I can just imagine it. The whole community coming together to celebrate like Dionysus,
Yeah.
the god of wine and revelry. Sounds like my kind of party.
Exactly. And those festivals, they weren't just about having fun, They were a way to strengthen the bond between the community and the gods that they venerated.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about offerings? What kind of things would people offer to the gods?
Again, it varied widely. It could be something as simple as a few grains of barley or a pinch of incense.
Yeah.
Or it could be something more elaborate like a work of art, a piece of music, or even a sacrifice.
Okay, sacrifice. That's where things start to get a bit intense, I think, for some people.
Right, yeah. And it's important to understand like the context of sacrifice in ancient cultures. It wasn't about trying to like bribe the gods or appease their anger. It was about acknowledging their power and expressing like gratitude for their blessings.
So it was more about like respect and reciprocity than fear.
Exactly, yeah. And even the act of sacrifice itself was often like deeply ritualized. It wasn't just like a random killing. There were specific prayers, chants, and actions that went along with it. It was a way to connect with the divine on a very, very deep level.
Okay, that's starting to paint a much clearer picture for me. So we've got festivals, we've got offerings, and I'm guessing prayer was probably a big part of it too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Prayer was a way to directly communicate with the gods,
Yeah.
to ask for their guidance, to thank them for their blessings, or simply to acknowledge their presence in your life.
And I'm imagining these prayers weren't like always formal or elaborate.
Not at all. In polytheism, there was this sense that the gods they were always present, always listening. So you could whisper a prayer to your hearth goddess as you lit the fire, or offer a quick prayer to Hermes before setting off on a journey.
Hmm?
It was about weaving the divine into the everyday.
That's really interesting. And it brings us back to this idea of re-enchantment, right? Like
Mm,
if you're constantly acknowledging the presence of the divine in your life, even in like the mundane things, it does make the world feel, a bit more magical, doesn't it?
exactly. And that sense of wonder and connection to something larger than ourselves, I think, is something that many people are searching for today, even if they don't realize it.
Okay, so I'm getting a much better sense of how polytheism kind of like worked in practice.
Hmm.
But I still have one big question.
Yeah.
How did people know like which gods to connect with?
That's where things get really interesting, and it's something that we'll explore after.
Yeah. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Okay, so we're back and we're ready to kind of wrap up our deep dive into polytheism.
Sounds good.
We've explored what it is and like how it was practiced back in the day, the good old days,
Hmm.
and even how it might be, relevant to our lives today.
Right, and we ended on, I think, a pretty interesting question, which
Yeah.
was, with all these guides and goddesses to choose from, how did people decide, like, which ones to actually connect with?
Right. Like it's not like there's this cosmic matchmaking service for deities.
Right.
So how did people like navigate this divine dating scene?
Well, it wasn't about finding the, like, right god
Right.
per se. It was more about finding the gods that resonated with you, the ones that felt relevant to your life and your needs.
So it was like a personal thing, kind of like, choosing your favorite band.
Exactly. Yeah. Greer talks about how, like, some people would feel like a natural affinity for certain deities based on, like, their personality or their profession.
Hmm.
Like, for example, a blacksmith might feel drawn to Hephaestus, the god of, fire and metalworking.
Okay, that makes sense. So if I were like a baker, I might like make offerings to Demeter, the goddess of agriculture and grain.
Exactly. Or if you were a sailor,
Yeah.
you might call upon Poseidon for safe passage across the seas. It was about, like, aligning yourself with the gods who could offer guidance and support in the areas of your life that were, like, most important to you.
So it wasn't like everyone had to worship the same set of gods.
No, not at all. In fact, like, many people would connect with multiple deities depending on what was going on in their lives.
Mm.
They might pray to one god for healing, another for protection, and another for, like, guidance in their career.
Oh, so you could build a whole divine support team.
You could, and that's one of the things that makes polytheism so adaptable.
Yeah.
It allows individuals to create a spiritual practice that's tailored to their specific needs and circumstances.
Okay, this is all starting to click for me. But I have to admit, like one thing I'm still kind of grappling with is this whole like ethics thing.
Hmm.
I mean, in monotheistic religions, you usually have like a pretty clear set of rules, about right and wrong.
Right.
But how does that work in polytheism when you've got all these different gods, each with their own like personalities and domains?
That's a great question. And it's one that Greer spends a lot of time, like, exploring in the book.
Uh-huh.
He argues that polytheism actually offers a more, like, nuanced approach to ethics,
Okay.
one that takes into account the complexity of human experience.
So it's not like there's like a cosmic 10 commandments.
Not exactly. Instead, like, polytheistic ethics are often rooted in ideas of balance, reciprocity, and honoring your obligations to both the gods and the community.
Okay, that makes sense. But give me like a concrete example, right?
Yeah.
How would those principles like play out in real life?
Well, think about it this way. Like, in many polytheistic cultures, there was a strong emphasis on hospitality.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
It was considered like a sacred duty to welcome strangers into your home and offer them, like, food and shelter.
Okay, I can see how that ties into the idea of reciprocity. You're offering kindness to others, and in turn, you can expect to receive kindness when you're in need.
Exactly. And that principle of reciprocity, it extended to like all aspects of life, from how you treated your family and friends to how you interacted with the natural world. It was about maintaining a harmonious balance, recognizing that your actions had consequences, not just for yourself, but for the entire like web of existence.
So it's almost like a cosmic version of karma.
Yeah, you could say that, and it's this emphasis on interconnectedness and responsibility that makes polytheism, I think, so relevant to some of the challenges that we're facing today, like environmental degradation and social injustice.
You're right. It's like polytheism is offering this whole new framework for thinking about our place in the world. Our responsibilities to each other and our relationship with the natural world.
And that's exactly what Greer is trying to do with this book. He's not saying we all need to go back to worshiping like the Greek pantheon, right? But he is asking us to consider the wisdom that's embedded in polytheistic worldviews, and to see if there are lessons we can learn from them as we navigate the complexities of the 21st century.
That's a powerful thought. So if we could kind of distill all this down to like one takeaway, what would it be? What do you hope people like walk away with after listening to this deep dive?
I hope people walk away with a sense of curiosity and an openness to different ways of understanding the divine.
Yeah.
Polytheism isn't just like some ancient myth. It's a rich and complex worldview that can offer us like valuable insights into ourselves, our world, and our place in the grand scheme of things.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. And who knows, maybe rediscovering the magic of polytheism can help us like re-enchant our own lives and our relationship with the world around us.
I like the sound of that.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of polytheism. It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope it's sparked some new ideas and perspectives for you.
Yeah.
And if you're curious to learn more, I highly recommend checking out John Michael Greer's book, A World Full of Gods.
Great book.
It's a thought-provoking exploration of a belief system that's just too often misunderstood and dismissed.
Yes, absolutely.
And as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into knowledge and ideas. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep an open mind to the wonders of the world, both seen and unseen.